You open this door with the key of reason. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of truth. A dimension of freedom. A dimension of joy. You're moving into the land of both the ideal and the real, of the possible and the actual. You've just crossed over into the capitalist corner.
Where reason meets reality, welcome to the capitalist corner.
Where reason meets reality, that's right, folks, otherwise known as the fun zone or your island of sanity in a sea of insanity. Welcome to the capitalist corner. Happy Friday to all of you folks. I am Mark Pellegrino, your host, and also the chairman of the American Capitalist Party, along with my co-host and the vice chair of the American Capitalist Party, Michael Liebowitz, who also has a very necessary podcast out there for all of you to see and hear called The Rational Egoist. Since rational egoism is the ethics that we would like to bring the world and make popular again, if it was ever popular. I think it had little teeny moments here and there where it was unconsciously popular. And during those times, we, of course, prospered as a people. Now we want to make it dominant over altruism. And one warrior out there fighting the fight is Michael. Michael, how's the show going? What do you got going on now for us?
Great episode online today where I interviewed a multiple disciplinary social scientist about the effect of that victim thinking has on the willingness of people to embrace conspiracy ideas. Very good discussion. Not a very long interview, 35 minutes, I think, but very good. I highly recommend it. But then I always highly recommend them. So, you know. It's not like I'm going to come on and say, you know, this episode really sucks. Stay away from this one.
Well, you might. You're an honest guy.
I am, but I don't know. I don't know that I have that much insight. Like if I put it up, I think it's good enough to watch.
It's interesting, though, that the victim mentality brings along with it the potentiality to embrace conspiracies, because a victim essentially gives up self-agency. They give up everything that involves self-agency, including the faculty of reason, right? And I think this victim mentality is also what has led us to the statist morass we are in, folks. People have been slowly giving up their agency. They want other people to do their thinking and acting for them. That is not a capitalist society. On that note, I want to say we are not affiliated with the Capitalist Party. Everything we say and do here comes strictly from Mark Pellegrino and Michael Liebowitz, as even though we represent the Capitalist Party in name as chair and vice chair, what we say here is our own opinion. So, folks, today's question and answer Friday, and I want you guys to know out there, if you're posing questions now in the chat, those questions will be dealt with later. We're going to be dealing with the questions that were posed first on our website. So if you want to pose questions in the future, make sure you pose those questions on the website so that we can answer them first. Those guys are going to get priorities. Everyone else is going to have to wait in line. That's just the way it goes. But Michael, did you first want to deal with this Facebook chat that you sent me? Because I couldn't really follow the thread that much of it. So you're going to have to explain to me.
All right. So my friend Carlos, while we were incarcerated, took part in something called the Second Chance Alliance. And it was volunteers came into the prison system to teach classes, to allow the inmates to teach classes. Now, on the face of it, people probably think, oh, that's great. Volunteers going in to teach the prisoners. So one day I was talking to Carlos and he let me read a paper written by the woman who was teaching it. It was called Critical Pedagogy. What that is basically just critical theory from the Frankfurt School dressed up and addressed to something else. The Frankfurt School, of course, is just distilled Marxism mixed with a little Freudianism. You know, got to have an extra batch of victimhood with what we're talking about. So that's the sort of backdrop. And now I thought this is absolutely ridiculous that you're in prison teaching criminals that they're victims, because anybody who's read Stanton Saminow understands that criminals are prone to see themselves as victims and use it to justify their bad behavior. So going into a prison and further filling them with this garbage is a bad idea. Okay. So Carlos, he maintains contact with some of the folks that took part in that, including the teacher. For the record, the teacher formerly, I don't want to say slandered, but she got pretty vicious toward Carlos and I on Facebook. And now she's a PhD, and she said, "Oh, haha," and she's laughing at us because of our views. And I said, "Oh, perhaps you'd like to sit down for a debate. I mean, after all, I'm the idiot and you're the PhD." Of course, she said, "Well, this isn't my area of expertise." And I said, "Well, that didn't prevent you from coming in here and going after my friend and me because it's not your area of expertise. It sure seemed like you thought it was when you were commenting and laughing at us, right?" So, anyway, so Carlos posted a video to his own Facebook page. It's a black guy talking about Charlie Kirk, and the black guy, I guess Charlie Kirk mentored him. And the guy says, anyone that thinks Charlie Kirk is a racist doesn't know him, and yada yada.
I saw the video. I saw that video.
Right. Again, I'm not a follower of Charlie Kirk. I don't really know his elaborate views. I know he's religious, so that puts us at odds because he's very big into promoting religion, that sort of thing. He was big on immigration controls, big MAGA guy. So I know I disagree with him there, but I don't know. I've seen some of his quotes taken out of context, as the aforementioned woman does. For instance, when she says that he said, she's claiming he said there's something wrong with black women's comprehension. That's not what he said. He was referring to specific black women when he said they don't have thought process. It wasn't a attack on all black women. Now, I told her in the chat, he may have done that. I don't know. But if he did, present it, because what you're referring to is an out of context quote. Okay, so this guy steps in and that I also know from prison, and he tells the woman in the chat, "Don't waste your time with these guys. They got Stockholm's," not me, but Carlos. He has Stockholm syndrome, licking the boot of the oppressor. It's all language straight out of the critical stuff, right? So, and he says he wishes he could just go back in time to the times when he'd punch somebody in the face, which is laughable because Carlos can throw hands. Let me just say that, right? I can't. Carlos can. I guess
Good boy, Carlos. Good boy,
Carlos. That's neither here nor there, but whatever, But it's interesting because I forget a lot of the left-wing stuff because I'm inundated with stuff coming from the right on my social media feeds, in conversation. In prison, it was the opposite. I spent an awful lot of time debating these guys on a variety of things, Malcolm X, all that. So I stepped in and I said to him, "Why the anger?" I said, "Are you seriously saying that anybody that disagrees with you must be brainwashed?" And I had told her I would debate her too. No response, but I told them, if you want to have a civil discussion without threats, you and I can have a debate. We'll debate these ideas. So let me read the response because it's very, very interesting. I got to just go to your thing here. So he says to me, now, I don't know if he had AI write this, but there's a deep irony here. Because the language is clearly straight out of Horkheimer, Marcuse, the critical school. So while these guys dress up their rhetoric as if it's for the oppressed minorities in this country, I find it interesting that they adopt the rhetoric and theories of white men from Europe, right? Because that's where they're getting these ideas. So he says, "You dress defense as intellect and call it mastery, but ideas without power are nothing but decoration for domination." Now, the critical theory, of course, their whole thing is that you have to teach to change the system. That's what education is for. It's to change the system. So that's what he's echoing here.
Oh, is that what you translated that word salad into?
Yeah, it's funny you use the term word salad because that's exactly what Carlos said about it. Yeah. So he says, "You want the theater of debate, a polite clash of words where nothing changes. I don't give you that. I don't debate oppression. I pull down the walls it builds." Okay, I'm an oppressor. Dude, I grew up on welfare, right? Both my parents were drug addicts. I spent a quarter century in prison, which is a sentence most people get for murder without committing a murder. I got far more time, and I'm not getting into I'm not saying I didn't deserve it. I'm just saying comparatively, I got creamed in court, right? I work I make about $500 a week, right? On average. The idea that I'm the oppressor of some sort is downright laughable. Nevertheless, he says, you frame me as angry, but that's a script whiteness has written for centuries. Again, whiteness has written the argument that you're making right now, dude. Right now.
Look, one thing that side lacks, Michael, is two things I should say: introspection and a sense of irony. They have neither, so they have no idea.
Right. So I'm gonna skip ahead, because I don't want to. He says, what you call anger is clarity, the fire that refuses silence. Okay, dude, go get some more James Baldwin, repackage it, and submit it as your own. All right.
That's exactly it. That does sound right. James Baldwin-esque.
So at the end, he says, when the rubble settles, I'll raise scaffolding that holds communities. A little narcissistic here. Lifts the erased and remakes what you thought was untouchable. That's the difference. You hide in comfort and call it reason. Yeah, dude, I've spent my entire life in comfort. I live in a basement. Let's keep it real. All right. So then at the bottom, he says, oh, and Michael, don't play with me. So a threat, which just reminds me that this is what I believe the people who, when they criticize the left and package anybody left the center into the same, that's what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Right. They're talking about that rhetoric. People who can't clash with ideas. So they resort to threats, resort to violence. Right. That's what they're talking about. And I just haven't been confronted with it in a while. So when Carlos sent that to me this morning and I saw it, it just was a reminder of, now the thing is that I find kind of, a little laughable is I dealt with that in prison and never shut my mouth, not once, and debated these guys. Right. So when the people in the MAGA tell me that, oh, you don't want to speak against the left, dude, I literally risked my safety on a almost daily basis arguing with the left. So that's all. I just wanted to bring that forward, let you hear it, maybe get your take, maybe the audience's.
Well, I'm glad to hear Carlos is fighting the good fight. So two guys came out of there with their heads on straight, despite what the system tried to do. And Michael, this guy was advocating for violence the second he says a debate is over, it's time to tear down walls. Now, you're already saying you're giving up persuasion, you want to use force against me. So now all bets of civilization between you and I are
gone.
And so Carlos's instinct, I wish the day and age could come where I can punch you in the face, and that would be a legitimate response to you. Well, it sort of is, because this guy is in essence.
No, he said that to Carlos.
Oh, he said that to Carlos?
Yeah, he said when Carlos put the post up, he said, "I wish I could just punch these guys in the face."
So he's threatening violence. Is his entire philosophy is violence? This man has thrown civilization away. I don't want to say I'm inciting anybody right now with my own speech, but a person like that, you are legitimately within your rights to handle. Let's just put it that way.
Now, the important thing, Mark. In this, I've stepped away from the prison reform stuff because first of all, it gets monotonous. Secondly, it gets nowhere. This dude learned this from volunteers that were welcomed into the prison. Right? For anybody who doubts what happens in prisons, as opposed to the opposite of reform, just look at this dude, because I promise you it's not unique.
Well, there you go. Unbelievable. I mean, they've done, I think, what the Frankfurt School wanted to do, they've more or less achieved. We should have James Lindsay on the show because he's sort of an expert on what the Frankfurt School did in the world. They took over academia, essentially, and they spread their tentacles throughout the culture. And so now it's sort of the de facto, it's the default mode of pretty much anybody who's fallen under their spell, which is almost everybody who's been in the academic system from K through 12 and especially in the university. There's a question here, Michael, that says, Mark, what are you drinking? I am drinking a decaffeinated coffee with extra half and half and 2 stevias.
Yeah. Yes. The beverage of the wussies. Okay. No, Mark has a problem. He can't drink real coffee. I kid.
I can drink real coffee now that I've had my surgery. I just choose not to because I think this has just enough lead in it to keep me awake, considering I've been awake for the last couple of days now. For those of you who don't know, Frankie is pretty ill right now. He was in the hospital yesterday, came back very happy, but he's got kidney issues at the moment. And so I'm hospitalizing him for the next 3 days and bringing him home at night before we travel to Toronto on Sunday. And hopefully his numbers can come down. If they can't, then, I'm going to have to face some pretty terrible realities. But I'm going to get off of that now because otherwise I'll spend the entire hour crying. Nicole Hingle says, I was very angry and scared over the whole Jimmy Kimmel situation. And I did my own research on the past firings regarding work cable news on-air talent in the past few years. For example, Tucker Carlson. Now, Tucker was fired basically for lying on air, right? I mean, he basically gave false information.
And he lied about specific people.
And he lied about
that he was defaming.
And it cost Fox News somewhere in the neighborhood of $7 billion. So he had to go. And now we've discovered exactly what Tucker Carlson is all about. He's a grifter. He's a weirdo. He's completely unhinged. He's the male version of Candace Owens, and gaining an audience as we speak, which says something about our society. Now, Don Lemon, who I found a completely repulsive individual. What was the reason for Don Lemon's firing? I mean, he was also...
I don't know. I didn't even know he was fired.
Yeah, he was fired. Now he does man on the street interviews and he gets his ass handed to him half the time. But completely, I mean, he went from a guy that it seemed like he was an objective news anchor to somebody who let the power get to his head. Chris Cuomo, of course, was a totally biased news person who was covering for his brother, very corrupt in that sense. Certainly not objective news. Joy Reid, of course, the same thing. And the FCC had nothing to do with this. It's just that these people were probably losing viewers by the thousands because it was very clear that they had skin in the game. Not skin in being good journalists, but skin in preserving a kind of narrative. But my takeaway from yesterday's show, this thought continues.
No, it doesn't. No. I don't know. Is that still Nicole?
Yes, this is still Nicole.
Okay.
Regarding Kimmel is that had the FCC kept their big fat nose out of it, there would be no issue because ABC as an employer has the right to fire or suspend anyone they choose. Am I correct in that? I believe you are correct in that. However, ABC now has a history with Trump where they have been sued by him. They've settled a great deal of money with him. And so any suggestion from the president himself, whether or not it's using the FCC to leverage licensing, would have a chilling effect on them. So they're already on the shit side of the president, and they don't want to remain on that side of the presidency. But I have a sense that Kimmel's comments were so innocuous as to not have really raised many eyebrows. I mean, all the guy said was the Republicans are working overtime to, one, get political capital out of this, and two, do anything in their power to make it seem like this guy, this assassin, is anything other than them. Now, he's entitled to that opinion. He's entitled to that opinion, folks. He wasn't, as Fox News said, making fun of Charlie Kirk at all. In fact, he had a very gracious comment on social media respecting Charlie Kirk and his own abhorrence for violence or killing human beings. So, but he's entitled to the opinion that the right is trying to spin this for political effect. And the fact that the right is coming down on him and using the power of the FCC to do that is very frightening. And they're threatening to do it with other networks as well. And the threat itself, folks, is chilling. That itself is going to produce a kind of self-censorship within those networks before any action is taken. If people don't understand that everything the government does is by force. Once you understand that the government is a gun, you'll stop thinking that the corporations have all the power. ABC is an incredibly powerful corporation. It's got a lot of money to spend. Doesn't spend enough on its actors, but it's got a lot of money to spend. All right. Does it have the power, or do the people with the guns have the power? I say the people with the guns always have the power. So let's take that away, folks, from the the corporatist fascist world that we're living in today. It's the government that is controlling, is the puppeteer in this case, not the corporate.
There is, Mark, what I think this question is about, and tell me if I'm wrong, Nicole, but there's a mass attempt on the part of Trumpsters out there that are conflating or ignoring even the fact that the FCC was involved in this. So they say, for instance, well, what about when this person was fired? What about when that person was fired? It's all over social media. I was listening to it on the radio yesterday. They said, but they didn't care when Roseanne got fired. Because what they're doing is they're conflating what private companies do. Now, it's interesting because they're now arguing that private companies can fire whomever they want, which I agree 100%. The problem here is the FCC got involved, much as when they were arguing that social media was censoring people. I said, no, social media are private companies. They can censor whomever they want. But when the government puts pressure on them to do so, the issue there is the government. It's not social media. It's what the government is doing. But, for years, I used to hear that, the left talk about, people on the left talk about that it's censorship to not give somebody a voice. And that's obviously garbage. But now the right is trying to defend this guy. Somebody this morning on X told me, no, the FCC guy just made a comment. There was no threat. He said we could do this the easy way or the hard way. I mean, come on.
Whenever somebody in government, particularly the head of an agency that has the power to execute the laws of the land or the regulations of the state, says something, it always has the threat of forceful action behind it. You cannot say something as the head of the FCC, we're going to do this the easy way or the hard way, and not expect the person to anticipate some form of threat, either a fine or some kind of technicality thrown at them that can have their license pulled. The FCC has that power, and they are using it liberally right now to knock out political competition and criticism of Trump. Because look, some of that criticism has been unhinged. You get the people on The View; they're absolute maniacs. They're brainless women.
They're talking about going after them too.
Yeah, well, but you know what? As much as I disagree with every single person on that panel, as idiotic as I think almost every single person on that panel is, the government has no right to go after them. All right?
Did you see? So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No.
You go. Okay, Chuck on Money says Kimmel was having issues before the FCC. Two things can be right. The FCC threatened and the network wanted an excuse to fire him. That's true, but it's still a problem that the FCC threatened him. But I'm also a little suspicious of the idea that they wanted to fire him anyway, mostly because I didn't hear anything coming from the networks, the network or network affiliates until after the threat. The timing is very suspicious on this, but I would say it doesn't even matter. People are trying to make it, you feel bad for Jimmy Kimmel. No, I couldn't care less about Jimmy Kimmel. I don't know the man. What I do care about is the federal government censoring speech. I don't care if it's Jimmy Kimmel's. I don't care if it's Donald Trump's. Anybody out there, they have no business censoring speech. And that's what this is amounts to.
I come from the rare position that I feel for it all. I feel for the fact that the government has no business censoring speech. I know Jimmy Kimmel. I was on Jimmy Kimmel's show.
You were. I went through this morning. I didn't. You said that yesterday. I wasn't paying attention.
I did a skit with him on his show. He was a fan of Lost. I found him a tremendously gracious human being. I don't agree with his politics at all. I am probably 100% against everything that Kimmel probably stands for politically. But that the government stepped in on this is nonsense. Was he having trouble? I don't know. 1.7 million viewers. You may consider that a bit of a difficult time, and that ABC was on the verge of firing him. Look, for ABC, there's a bottom line, right? There's a bottom line of viewership. There's a bottom line. If they feel that they are losing with somebody, they don't need excuses, okay? They've contracted this stuff all in advance. They've thought about it long beforehand. They don't need excuses. They will fire him with whatever golden parachute he's negotiated into his contract. He's toast. He's gone. They don't need the excuse of the FCC to do it. I want you to know that. If you think ABC has a heart for any of its entertainers, you're out to lunch. And I could tell you stories for days. they don't care. They don't care. Okay, and if Kimmel was losing traction, they would have fired him if it really mattered to them. So James Valiant says something he quotes Voltaire, and I do love this quote, by the way. Judge a man by his questions, not his answers. I do love that quote. Do you like that quote?
Sure. It sounds like Voltaire. I was going through, did he say it's Voltaire? Because I was going through Voltaire quotes this morning because I posted one. I like Voltaire's quotes. Why do I like Voltaire's quotes?
No. Everybody could say why you like Voltaire's quotes, but why particularly this morning were you going through them?
Just because I was looking for a quote to post. Just
like an inspirational quote for people.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do that. I look for quotes so that I can post them.
Oh, okay.
Is this confusing?
No, but you're acting like
I can elaborate.
Oh, no, you don't have to. I just thought it was interesting.
I started off saying I was going through Voltaire quotes to post, and then you said why?
Yeah,
but I said it in my initial statement.
Yeah, but I get it. Okay, I just don't go through quotes to try to post those inspirational quotes. Maybe I should. Maybe the world.
And I don't do readings for acting jobs. We do different things.
Thank God.
I'm not an actor.
All I can say is thank Dad. Thank Dad. Ali Beard says, thoughts on the UK March for Free Speech ran by right activist Tommy Robinson.
I don't know anything about it, but she asked a different question. And I'm going to, unless you know a lot about this march, there is an interesting question that I would like to discuss. But if you want to get into this one,
I want to get into it a little bit only because I saw one speech by a Spanish expat who gave a speech about freedom and the meaning of freedom in the UK. And
okay, so you did see it. Okay, go ahead.
I did see a little bit of it, and I saw Tommy Robinson in the background. He's a very controversial figure for a number of reasons. He's one of the first people in the UK to highlight the toxicity of the Islamic movement in the UK and its malignant spread throughout society. In some respects, he's exaggerated the truth and lied a little bit in his reporting, but in other respects, he's exposed something that was real. The rape gangs were real, and the sex trafficking was real, and the grooming was real, and the fact that somewhere in the neighborhood of 25% of the Muslims in the UK are for Islamic law and for putting Islamic law in codifying it into the system, and of course are winning positions in parliament as we speak. He's concerned about a cultural change. Now, oftentimes this is associated with race, with European, and there was a tad of that nationalistic European white sort of thing running through the ceremony that I saw, which I find unfortunate because really it should be about the Enlightenment ideas that came from England, and in some respects, not in many when it comes to the continent, but certainly from England, that led to the great enrichment, that led to the Industrial Revolution and the birth of freedom in the United States and in England, and in the rise in human prosperity. Now, if they're simply talking about not wanting to change the guard respecting ideas and revert to a regressive form of philosophy, 7th century philosophy that hinders human progress and that harms people, then I am for that. But if it's for a sort of nationalistic movement that's racially oriented, not for it, because I think a Pakistani immigrant, let's just speak for America, can be more American than somebody who grew up in Iowa and went to college here and works. I've found so many immigrants and people who lived in Europe and abroad who are more American than many Americans here. I find more Canadians who are more American than the Americans that I talk to here. So remember, Americanism is an idea, and it's an offshoot of the Anglo-Saxon system that came out of England, which I hope is what they are trying to preserve. Michael, that's my say on it. So long as it's not racialized, I think it's a step in the positive direction.
Sounds good to me. I haven't followed the story, so I really don't have much to say, but I'll take your word because I trust you.
Okay, so what was the other question that she asked that you wanted to
It was
do?
also from Allie Beard. So that's why I don't know if we want to have her allow her to double dip, but I like the other question. So I kind of want to put it out there.
Go ahead.
All right. She says, what do y'all think of DC Comics pulling off their shelves the latest Red Hood comic that was released this past Wednesday because of the creator's comment saying on Blue Sky, I hope the bullet is okay after touching Charlie Kirk? Well, this, as long as the government's not involved, I'm fine with it. If I owned a store and a guy did that, I'd pull it off the shelf, and then people get to decide, do they want to deal with that store or not? And the market works it out based on the decisions of individuals. The problem only comes when the government steps in and starts to threaten people. If it's free choice, I'm all for it. Let the free decisions of people work themselves out, and it'll get to an answer, get to a resolution. That's voluntary.
That's exactly it. When a private individual does something like that, Allie, they're not violating anyone's rights. They're establishing their own freedom and right of association. So when the government does it, it is violating rights. It's initiating force against another person. If you need us to make that even more clear and distinct, let us know. But I'm for what DC did. I think if that's what this guy said on Blue Sky, he's a complete cunt. Pardon my French, but that's a terrible, terrible thing to say.
What is that? The French? I hear that often the time. Why are swear words considered French? Do you know? I mean, I know you spend a lot of time over there.
I don't know. I could ask Grok why. I'm assuming I don't know.
Pardon my French. Like, why French? I don't know. It seems like maybe
at one time French was considered the language of diplomacy. So
maybe it was the language of vulgarity. I would think, not diplomacy.
It was the language of diplomacy for a long time. So maybe
it was. I know in Europe it was, but what I'm saying is that wouldn't explain why swear words. Oh, you're saying because people are swearing, then they say "pardon my French," and then it spreads.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we got an answer. It was a made-up one, but we'll roll with it.
Yeah, Grok will know.
How do you? Maybe Grok won't know. I don't know. But Jason Adams has a question. Go ahead and read it.
Do you consider guns in private hands outside unregulated capitalism, e.g., trade in armaments, differs from productive, presumed innocent businessmen engaged in free commercial speech in a free market? Wait, I'm not sure I understand the question, Michael. So
I don't understand the question at all. He had a good question the other day, and I don't remember it. And I told him to bring it Friday, but this wasn't it. So Jason, please.
So trade in armaments differs from productive, presumed innocent businessmen. So he's saying, is there a difference, I guess, in the trade of armaments and guns as opposed to something that's productive enterprise?
But I don't understand the outside regulated capitalism. That's what I'm not getting.
Guns in private hands outside unregulated. Yeah, I don't understand what outside unregulated capital.
That's my concern.
Well, certainly there is a distinction, I think, Jason, with respect to what the Second Amendment applies to, what kinds of weapons the Second Amendment applies to. And there is a place where government, where reasonable people can understand that there are armaments which the private citizen shouldn't have because they are actual weapons that should be in the state's hands. Atomic bombs, mortars, artillery, whatever a citizen would face, I think, in terms of initiated force, is what I think are appropriate for him to have as arms. And that, to me, means whatever a policeman carries should be what a citizen carries, since a policeman faces all of the same issues that a citizen faces, except after the fact, usually. So that means handguns, shotguns, and even AR-15s and AK-47s are all on the table as adequate weapons of defense because they deal with different things. They deal with personal defense, home defense, and when civil society breaks down and there is no authority to appeal to, in which case an AK-47 is an appropriate weapon against the mob who's coming to your house to loot you. It is definitely more of a deterrent than a six-shooter. So, but this is something I'm actually going to be writing about. I'm still in the midst of writing about it because it's a touchy issue. Some objectivists think that the government has the right to regulate arms, period, because it is a force regulator, and we defer. We defer retaliatory force to the government, so it should have a say in what kinds of guns that the citizens carry. I'm somewhere negotiating my way through the middle of that and the anarchist belief that you can have a howitzer in your backyard if you so choose.
Sure. So I have a very, I'm not sure is the short answer. I struggle with this as a constitutional originalist because what did the original Second Amendment mean? What was its purpose? I agree. If something elevates to the degree of risk that say a nuclear weapon or a tank in private hands does, my logic tells me they could outlaw it. Then I say, well, okay, well, the Second Amendment was so people could defend themselves in large part against government oppression. Right. So then the argument becomes, well, the government has these things. How can you defend yourself against the government if you're not allowed to have them? I don't think that's the right answer. I'm just saying I understand where the logic goes, and I'm not quite sure where to draw the line.
Well, let me just say something. An armed citizenry is a very formidable a logistical task for an army, even a one that's very sophisticated to overcome. If you think about it, Hitler was thinking about invading Switzerland and decided to bypass them because every single person there has a firearm and is a part of the army, which meant he would have been facing an incredible obstacle to his progress. Now, modern warfare makes that calculus a little bit different. Drone warfare and smart bombs and all the things that we have now that are so sophisticated make the calculus a little bit different. But it's still, Michael, 348 million or so, or let's say 250 million armed individuals is a very, very scary prospect for any army that needs to invade and take territory, which means they have to put boots on the ground at some point. And so it's a fairly good deterrent, even though guys like Yaron Brook would say it's not a deterrent. They've got planes, they got atomic bombs, they've got all this stuff that we can't possibly fight. It is a deterrent, but more than that, it's a deterrent against the things that every citizen will probably confront at least once in their lifetime, whether it's a breakdown of civil society or straight out crime in their own house or in the streets. That is something that the individual has the right to protect himself against predominantly, even though the original intention, of course, was to make the government afraid of the people, which I think the government should always be afraid of the people. We shouldn't be afraid of the government, folks. The government should be afraid of us, and that's the way you keep them tame.
All right, so I got an answer from Grok, by the way, on the French thing.
Oh, good.
Yes, and it appears that even when the two of us are blindly guessing, I come out on top.
Okay.
Just saying. Says the phrase, pardon my French, originates from 19th century England. It was used as an apology when someone swore or used coarse language, implying that the offensive words were French in origin, as French was stereotyped as a more risqué or vulgar language in English-speaking circles. The earliest known use appears in 1830s British literature, where French was associated with sophistication, but also with less restrained social norms. The phrase became a polite way to acknowledge a verbal slip while deflecting blame humorously. Okay, so now that we've shown that I'm right again, we have a question here from my friend Subby. This is going to Mark. It's obviously not to me.
Who is the most famous person you're friends with? Which actor, actress that you know has the most integrity? First of all, the second question I will not answer publicly because that's very personal. That's a very personal one, and I'm not sure. Let's just say I don't necessarily make friends with all of the people that I've worked with in Hollywood. Now, that may be a faux pas on my part, but I presume from talking to many of them that we don't share the same values. So there's really no reason for me to get their number and talk to them because I'm not going to use them to try to get a job. That's just not the way I roll. If I like your values, then I become friends with you. I'm friends with a lot of the folks from Supernatural. There's a few of the folks on the show whose values I do not agree with, and they don't agree with my values. But we like each other as human beings, and we all know that our hearts are in the right place. We want humanity to advance. We have different notions about the way that works, but we all work together well and have good vibes with each other. But I know a lot of famous people, and let's just say in Hollywood, integrity is. Let me say this: I think Gary Sinise was one of the guys that I look at. I worked with him in the last season of 13 Reasons Why. He played the therapist in 13 Reasons Why in season 4. It was the last job he did before he retired fully. Now, he's a conservative across the board, hardline conservative, but I found him to be one of the most honest guys out there. He had a great deal of integrity, and he and Jon Voight started an organization called Friends of Abe, which was originally a underground organization of conservatives in Hollywood, which got outed by a leftist, by the way, who infiltrated it and then started outing people. Most people, Michael, who were below the line, which means they were people at the production level, and these people were getting blacklisted. So he was getting, gaffers blacklisted, lighting technicians, people who really needed money, who weren't making hundreds of thousands of dollars a week. But were literally living, paycheck to paycheck, some of them. But they had a place where they could talk conservative values, but also they were quite open to me. I went to a couple of these meetings, and usually they would wind up gathered around me, who was an enemy of conservatism at the time, conservatism even as it was happening in the 2000s. But they were open to it. Jon Voight was also part of that group that opened up the FOA, which eventually closed down because of the infiltration by the leftists. But Jon Voight, I had a great experience with Jon Voight on the red carpet. We were on the red carpet at what they call the TCAs, which it's this huge Television Critics Association thing. When you're a regular on a series, you have to go basically sell your show to the Television Critics Association. It's a very nerve-wracking thing. It's like 16 hours of press that you have to do. And at the end of it, there's a party, as there usually is. And there's a red carpet that you have to go through. You're pitching your show to more people. And I remember we were waiting in line before we could go. And some people were able to hop the line. Robin Williams, rest his soul, rest in peace. He hopped the line, all right, and just started doing his shtick. His publicist pushed him in front of us. Jon Voight's people were pushing him in front of us too, and he looked at me and he said, "Do you mind? I'm sorry, they're pushing me ahead. Do you mind if I go ahead of you guys?" I'm like, "John, no. You're the first person who asked us that. I really appreciate you. I want you to know I appreciate FOA as well. I appreciate you as a human being. Go ahead, get in front of us." I found him, one of the only quote unquote A-list actors to actually consider other people around him. I found that to be a rather marvelous trait. And I worked with him on National Treasure, and I found him to be a very gracious human being. So those guys, though they don't fall into necessarily my values, they certainly follow those values 100%, particularly Gary Sinise, who's now started doing charitable organizations for, wounded warriors and for soldiers all over the world. So those guys have a great deal of integrity.
Awesome. All right. So Subby gets a little starstruck. Let me just say that. See, I hide my starstruckness, so nobody can see how in awe I am of Mark when we're on the show. I deflect with humor. Anyways, but I do make sure to tell just about everybody I meet, "Hey, you watch Supernatural?" And then I host the show with the guy. Okay. So Deeper with the Ego says, "Mike, in prison, how do men get big? Is prison food that nutritious? Do they buy food on their own somehow?" Well, they feed you 3 meals a day. I'm guessing it's probably 2,000 calorie diet a day, but yes, you can buy stuff on commissary. They sell protein powders, they sell tuna, they sell mackerel. These are foods that are high in protein. They also show, sell stuff high in carbohydrates, in noodles and, ramen noodles. They're basically those little soups you break up. They sell those. They sell rice. They sell a variety of meat. So yeah, I mean, and you have a gym. So that's how they do it. It's not really a big secret.
Absolutely. Deeper with Diego says Kirk getting shot was a crime, not a free speech issue. People on the right wanting the government to censor ABC is a literal freedom of speech issue. Absolutely right. And the fact that the right, which formerly stood for constitutionalism, for a strict or originalist interpretation of the Constitution, is okay with this, makes it that much more egregious, folks. Same thing happened with Stephen King. Yeah, Stephen King made some faux pas, didn't he, recently on social media? And he had to retract the statement. He's particularly stupid politically. I mean, for such a great writer, and I do enjoy his work, to be honest with you, I find him to be almost an infant when it comes to political assessment. And it amazes me that a man who could spin narratives of such complexity could be so simple-minded in other ways. It just goes to show you, folks, that intelligence doesn't necessarily transfer across the field.
It does not. Manu said up here that she should go to prison to gain some weight. Manu, I actually have a request. Please smile in your profile picture on Facebook. You look very grumpy, and I want to see some happiness. Like, you have a nice smile. Lee says we missed her question. It's being ignored. I don't know what she's talking about. So
I see here. Mark, have you started View from a Cage yet? It has not arrived yet from Amazon, but it should be arriving soon. So when it arrives, I will take it with me and read it. But I will also be primarily doing two things when I am on location. One is trying to save my dog's life, and two will be doing my job as an actor, which is, in this case, requiring a great deal of historical research that I'm doing. So those two things are going to consume me first and foremost. The rest will play out afterwards.
When they say on location, Mark, what does that mean? It's the location where you're filming?
Yeah. So in Toronto. So I'm in Toronto as opposed to here in LA. You need at least one governor for a rebellion to be considered credible or reasonable. Jason Adams said you'd need at least one governor for a rebellion to be considered credible or reasonable. Is he talking about now states who are coming out against Trump, trying to send militia, trying to send National Guard troops into the states?
I'm not sure, but here he asks, in a constitutional question, should precision and clarification of the Second Amendment be negotiated in return for the government giving up certain areas of control? I think that if there was a real constitutional convention, there needs to be a lot of clarity that would need to take place. I think that the government was given far too much. The problem is, I'm going to say wiggle room, but it's just dishonesty. And that's where I have a hard time, because the Commerce Clause obviously doesn't refer to the stuff they've usurped it for. So I guess it doesn't matter how precise.
Describe how the Commerce Clause came into being, if you can, because I don't know that a lot of people know that.
Well, the problem is that with disparate states that were not unified, is that states could put, for instance, tariffs on other states. So they wanted to create a zone for free trade where they wouldn't have that. So the ability to regulate commerce was taken away from the individual states and given to the national government, the federal government. Now, I've read that what regulate meant at the time, and I'm not 100% certain of this, was to make regular, meaning to make it even throughout the states so that they would have a free trade zone. I'm confident that it was done to create free trade amongst the states. I'm just not positive about the meaning of the term regulate at the time. But the broader problem is when you use a term, any terms that are used, no matter how precise they are in whatever constitution you have, if people are hell-bent on getting around it and they're hell-bent on electing people who are going to put in their will, they're just going to misinterpret it anyways. it's like, I mean, there's a great quote from Lysander Spooner, either the Constitution, I'm going to butcher it a little bit, but basically he said either the Constitution doesn't try to restrain the government power, in which case it's succeeding, or it has tried and is demonstrated, or it does and has failed. And there's a lot of truth to that. But before we go too far with it's failed, it has done a pretty decent job in spite of dishonesty on the part of judges and politicians and a large, portion of the populace who doesn't care about it or care about freedom. It has done a lot. I mean, we still can cite it if we go to court. We still can make arguments, and we still are a relatively free country. So I don't want to push it, too far down, out of the way as if it's just been a complete debacle, because it hasn't.
Yeah, I think the Constitution is only as good as the ethics of those who are practicing it. At the time that it was written, some of the language was so general as to be used by nefarious folks and people with intentions of growing political power over people to their own benefit. And but the people at the time generally had this sense that the government should be very, very limited in scope, and people should be free to act for their own lives. And the cultural winds have shifted over the last 100 years, and that's why the Constitution is only a piece of paper. But it's still an obstacle. It's still an obstacle that the people still, these politicians in the political class, feel obligated to overcome. But not enough of one, because it's not ironclad. It's not contradiction free, and so these people are able to take advantage of the contradictions in it and use it to grow state power. Mark, did you watch Weapons yet? When will the horror movie club start? Yes, I did see Weapons. By the way, I'll be writing a review on it in the next couple of weeks. I have to plan out exactly how the horror movie club will work and the tiers and stuff that I'm going to establish, so that some of us will be watching movies together, and how we're going to pick movies and review them and discuss them. But it should be in the next couple of weeks. My priority right now is making my dog healthy. Ian Gilmore says the founders assumed that people with the right morals would be in charge. Yes, I think that's true. And it quickly became clear that they'd left holes that bad actors could take advantage of. Essentially what I said, but I think better formulated, Ian. Thank you for that.
Well, I don't know if you just read this because I was busy reading it, but he says you can't write a document that closes all holes. Did you read that?
No.
Okay, so Ian says the problem is that you can't write a document that closes all the holes. It's not possible. I'm inclined to agree with Ian, but I would go so far to say that even if you could, it doesn't matter. If human beings are hell-bent on getting around it, a document in and of itself can't restrain them. And it goes back to the first part, that you have to have not just the people with the right morals in charge, but you have to have a moral basis for your society that values liberty, because otherwise it doesn't matter. People are just going to get around it. I mean, they could even throw the thing out if they really wanted to. So you have to have the proper culture, the proper morals, the proper belief system if you're going to maintain a constitutional republic. The Constitution is good. You have to have it, I think, but I just don't think it's enough. It's necessary, but not sufficient.
I would agree, but I would think that weeding out contradictions would make it very, very, very difficult for these bad actors to do their mischief. So certainly taking out collectivist language that talks about general welfare or places things that allows the government to be responsible for anything generalized. I think would go a long ways towards correcting some of the issues we have, since those are the clauses that are used to validate welfare statism. May the weekend bless Frankie with good health and a wagging tail. Thank you very much, Greg. I'm going to cry. So I have to not think about that, try to focus on the moment as much as possible, but I appreciate you guys sending all the good vibes you can. So do we continue taking these questions? There seem to be tons of them. Michael, do you want to read one? Or should I talk about what does it mean for Trump to designate Antifa a terrorist organization?
Go with that. I like that. That's a good one.
Yeah, man. So Trump seems to be busy designating lots of groups that he doesn't like terrorist organizations. And I'm wondering when that's going to happen to us, Michael. When are we going to be considered a terrorist organization? Because one, we don't like Trump. Two, we disagree with pretty much everything he's doing. And three, we make fun of him.
So I'll tell you when it's going to happen. When they come and put pressure on me and threaten to send me back to prison, I'm going to throw you and Valiant under the bus, say that you two have been intimidating me to say the things I'm saying, and you two should be designated. So that's when it will happen.
I guess, folks, it happens when the platform becomes big enough, which we want it to, folks. That means you got to like and subscribe and share this from YouTube across social media platforms so that people get the idea that rational egoism, independence, and individual rights is the way to go for the future. It's the only thing that will save us from going off the status cliff. Yes, what were you going to say?
You know, from reading this, I learned something I never knew. I never knew there's no designated domestic terrorist groups. That this isn't even something that's done.
How strange.
Right. Yeah. In the interest of the even more interesting thing is back when in 1996, when they put in the Effective Terrorism and Death Penalty Act, which back to prison, most people in prison are familiar with because it puts limits on habeas corpus, on how long from your sentence till you can file. So you only get 18 months to do it. But evidently there was negotiations at the time, and it was the Republicans, surprise, surprise, who didn't want there to be allowance for domestic terrorists. But now we have the Donald who wants it. So the Republicans are silent. And something else, and I've heard this before, it is hard to really grasp, is that Antifa isn't even really a thing. That's the claim that was made in the article. And I don't know, because I've heard it before, but I've heard it that it is. But the article claims Antifa is basically just a loose, is a word used to describe a vast array of people with left-leaning positions that engage in, rebel rousing violence, that sort of thing. Does it even exist, Mark? Is it a coherent organization?
It does. I don't know that it has a head or an organization in the way that a gang or a mafia does, but it certainly does exist. And there are certainly ways in which they use social media to coalesce around certain areas and promote chaos. So there's enough organization, for example, for them to put pallets of bricks out and when they know there's going to be a protest at certain places, and to organize hundreds of people in an area. I certainly think if you're going to go to a protest with knee pads and elbow pads and a shield and a helmet and a backpack, that you should immediately be arrested because you're not up to any good. You're not up to any good. You're foreshadowing that you are anticipating violence, whether you're going to be the start of it or someone else. Doesn't matter. There's no place for you to be all weaponized going to a protest at all. And I question the legitimacy of a protest through the streets anyway, as you know. But it is at least loose organization of people. I don't know that they could use the RICO statutes to try to affect any legal action against these folks. But they are certainly a malignant group of chaotic folks. I look at them more like the people that assembled in the Fight Club. You remember the movie The Fight Club?
No.
Okay, you got to watch The Fight Club because it becomes like a movement led by this guy. I don't want to give away the twist, so I won't tell you the twist.
Yeah, the first rule of Fight Club is don't talk about Fight Club. Right, but you're going to do it. You're violating it.
It becomes an underground movement where people basically sabotage anything that they can, anything good, anything that's a pillar of society becomes a target, and literally the droogs sort of take over, and that's what Antifa is. It seems to be modeled after that. I mean, Race Jacobson says Antifa have a logo. They have a decentralized structure. That's true, which makes them more difficult to track down, which makes them more difficult to be pursued by law enforcement. So it's sort of asymmetrical warfare type.
Ian Gilmore says it's codswallop. He said there's no such organization as Antifa.
It's a decentralized organization. It's certainly asymmetrical warfare against civilized society. So it's possible for both of them to be right at the same time. Michael, we are 2
What
minutes.
is it? Schrodinger's domestic terrorist organization?
We are 2 minutes overtime, which means you have to give the capitalist thought for the day.
I don't know how I got roped into it again, because whatever, you miss so many times. I'm always doing it. No, I'm going to do it. I want a little appreciation. That's
how about you do that, and I'll pose the questions that people can answer on.
Perfect. That works perfectly for me. The capitalist thought of the day is, I'm going to take this back to the very beginning, and the idea of critical theory, the idea of seeing the world through a lens of oppressor and oppressed. And I'm not saying that there's never been any oppressor and there's never been any oppressed. But if you tend to see the world through that lens, especially if you're seeing yourself as the oppressed, you're denying agency to yourself. You're not understanding the role that you play in shaping the environment and accomplishing your goals, which ironically is a contradiction within the very paper, or the very post that the guy wrote earlier, where he talks about how the purpose of ideas is to change things. So he's assuming agency within a backdrop of not having it and of being oppressed. But if you do what the hell was his name, Julian Roeder said, and develop an internal locus of control, meaning you're not shaped by outside forces, you are the shaper. If you do that, you are then able to accomplish your goals if the society is free. So what we need is a free society with people with self-esteem, people who believe in themselves. Then we can truly accomplish our goals. And that was my meandering way of saying, have self-confidence, advocate for freedom, set goals, reach them.
That's why I think a capitalist society is so healthy, folks, and why a statist collective society is so unhealthy. A capitalist society, it emphasizes self-reliance, and self-reliance lends itself to a strong self-esteem. Being a rational person helps you feel like you have control over many elements of your life, which you do. Statism and collectivism, on the other hand, rob you of those things, which are the source of your human dignity, folks. Your self-esteem comes from your capacity to act in the world, your successful attainment of values, however small those values may be. You don't have to be Jeff Bezos. You have your own life and your own values to attain, and attaining those values lends itself to a healthy, happy life. And the collectivist world denies you that capacity by robbing you of moral agency and saying, you can't do it on your own. You need philosopher kings to do it for you. Nothing more degrading to a human spirit than that. So let's uplift humanity. We are the party of aspirational values, folks, and it's okay to be aspirational. You can accept where you are and at the same time aspire to be better. That's fine. And so remember to look for these values. Go to AmericanCapitalistParty.org. Read our policies, like and subscribe to this station, and also share it liberally on YouTube and across other formats, so that this message gets out there to the world. Now, I want to ask you guys a question. You can answer it, please. It's not related to capitalism or politics, but would you free dive with a great white shark? Yes or no? And why? All right, you have 23 hours to check your premises, folks. If there's an ounce of statism in you, I want you to think about it real hard so that you can, you have more than that, right? It's 71 hours? Or do they have a whole weekend? I forget, the weekend.
I'm not going to do the math right now.
Yeah, you have till Monday, folks, to rethink your premises. If you're thinking in any tribalist terms, think about that. Come back to us, and let's see if we could change your mind. All right. Until that time, live in peace, my friend.
And Manu, smile in your profile picture. Have a great weekend, guys.